can't do it. I can't do it. That's so stressful.
That still goes. That's really good, for
not knowing anything.
For an ocarina, that's nothing like a real ocarina.
No, not really. Hey, ocarina. Anyway,
That's racist.
how is that racist?
Hey, Macarena, but you're like, hey,
You're
ocarina.
making fun of my culture?
Anyway.
And Steve can say that.
Welcome to the first official episode of the Movie Panda Podcast. This is a show that we're going to do every Sunday, I believe. We're going to upload a review of a movie we went and saw in theaters. And Dylan, would you like to tell the audience what movie we saw in theaters today?
A Quiet Place.
I don't... the burp does not absolutely have anything to do with the movie.
It does, because if you do it, you die.
But
I imagine any form of bodily function at that point is going to... You know what?
What?
There's trolls in the world. I don't mean the monster.
Oh,
I mean,
you
like,
mean there's people that will like set up like...
Because, there'd be like that one guy that can like fart with his armpit.
Oh.
Who would just run around doing that.
Anyway, I'm your host, Dale. To my right is Steve. Say hello, Steve.
Hi.
Yeah, that's Steve. And to my left is Dylan.
Yo.
And we're going to give you a short, comprehensive review of what we thought of A Quiet Place. Now, there will be spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie yet and you would like to see the movie, don't tune in. Just go ahead and stop right now.
Or if you think reviews have no effect on your judgment of the movie, go see it anyway after listening to this podcast, because this is just our opinion.
Or if you could be doing literally anything else with your time, do that. We're not funny. So let's just go ahead. We've given you your warning. We're going to go ahead and get into it. Steve has not seen the movie yet.
It probably never will. It's scary.
It's scary. It's spooky. But I myself am not a fan of like horror or thriller type movies. I don't like paying to be scared. That's just a personal preference of mine. But living with Doan loves scary movies.
Oh,
he
yeah.
loves horror movies, and so I've had to learn to get used to watching horror movies and scary movies.
Especially if you come home and I'm already like into it. Like,
Yeah.
It's over now. Like,
Yeah,
you can't, there's nothing you can do about it.
And Dylan has been trying to get me to watch more and more horror movies. And so just because I like Dylan, I figure I'll get into it. And so far I've had a good experience doing it. Still not my personal choice of movie. But this movie was a good movie. It was directed by John Krasinski. I think this is his third movie he has directed, and he just gets better and better with every movie.
Everything he appears in, I feel like, has fleshed him out as a person.
Mm-hmm. And I was scared for his career because he almost got typecasted as that Jim Halpert kind of character. So I was almost scared that he wouldn't be able to play anything other than Jim Halpert, or at least that no one would cast him for anything other than Jim Halpert. And it almost seems like he had to direct his own movies in order for him to play a position other than Jim Halpert. But he did a phenomenal job in this movie, both directing it and acting it. Steve, let me get your 2 cents on the movie, having not seen what you think the plot is.
It looks scary. John Krasinski has a really nice beard.
You're not wrong.
I'm curious if people actually fart in this world.
They probably don't do any like general like human thing like coughing or sneezing, or
It's impossible. You would explode.
they just hold it in.
Well, okay, so just as a quick overview of the film, so the movie like just came out. Like what when was its opening night?
6 minutes ago.
I think it was last Thursday.
Something like that. So it hasn't been out long. It's a movie I personally have been really looking forward to because it just, again, like I love thrillers and horror films. So it
drank
like
coffee before
it
this.
no
I got the burps.
no yeah, gassy. Woo. See, we would die
Yeah.
immediately. So the
God, you couldn't have coffee in there.
I want to know how you brew it.
Very carefully.
Because if you know, like, okay, so the basic overview of the movie is, there is, at some point, I assume, between the years, I guess it would be about 2018. It would be like this year when it happened.
2018,
So,
I believe 2018 to 2020.
yeah.
God
I'm
bless.
so sorry. So around like our time in 2018, something happened. We don't know what. It doesn't explain, which I actually kind of enjoyed that part of the movie. You don't know why or how the creatures that are in the movie appear. You just know they exist, and you know that obviously, because the opening picture says what 89 days in.
Yeah.
It obviously didn't take very long for them to figure out what to do. So these creatures of here. And if you've seen any of the trailers, you obviously know that it's the whole thing behind it is that the family in it, with John Krasinski as the dad, and they all speak in sign language, which surprisingly, for a movie called Quiet Place, it actually had quite a bit of talking in it, and I was kind of disappointed in that aspect.
It didn't have anywhere near as much talking.
No,
as
I
thought
mean,
it was
for an
gonna have,
hour and a half long movie,
which is a short time nowadays.
yeah. So for
Since
that,
movies
there was
run-
very little talking. Like,
Movies run for like 3 to 4 hours now. Like I've got to schedule my day around watching a movie.
in watching the movie, there's probably 3 scenes where they spoke. Like they actually had like. And there's plenty of scenes where when they're doing sign language, the one, you know, the only one character in the entire movie is actually deaf, but the rest of the family is not. And when they speak to each other, those that are not deaf, there are scenes where while they're doing sign language, they mouth words and they kind of very softly whisper the words as they sign it to each other, the ones that can actually hear it. So I mean, they had those few scenes, but there's only about 3 scenes where people actually speak in open volume to each other. So again, the premise of the movie is just these monsters that suddenly are here on the earth, hunt down, and okay, so interesting, there's a lot of scenes where there's birds and such making noise. Mm-hmm. I don't know if the monsters go after them because there's the scene with the raccoons, and one of the raccoons gets killed by the monster. So I don't know if they just hunt down all noise or if it's just.
I would assume, being a predator, they would hunt down whatever is making the loudest noise. It's not just, like, exclusive to humans.
Yeah, which I did like, because I was kind of worried about that when we were first watching it. I was afraid that, like, oh, it's going to be something like they only hunt down human beings. But no, they definitely seemed, it was more like they were just a type of alpha predator in nature that just so happened, like, we as human beings didn't immediately know how to overcome them. So the movie takes place in a span of a year and a half. You don't see the entire year and a half. It starts out like 89 days in, and then it skips about a year.
Yeah, give or take a year and a half.
Yeah, so
and this family lives on like a farm. They've got like a lighting rig set up that's like a warning light system. So like if everything's normal, the light bulbs are a normal color. And if things are wrong, the light bulbs are red. Which is that's a terrifying thing. Like just the color red is such an aggressive color, and using it in this movie really helps set the atmosphere for like things going awry. And like I thought that was wonderful visuals on the staff's part and I'll go ahead and say this: the cinematography and filming of this movie absolutely wonderful. They chose wonderful camera angles. They did a lot of excellent world building, and they gave you just enough information that you needed to get you like drawn into the world, and you left wanting more of it. And I really appreciated that aspect. One thing I liked is you didn't just assume that this was the only family in the entire world to survive, because there's a scene in the movie where John Krasinski's character is like sitting on top of like a silo, and he sets fire to like a torch or something, and you see like out in the distance all around the hills like fires being set, like Lord of the Rings style, where they're like doing signal fires and stuff like that. So it's just people like in sync being like, okay, we hear you. And so I wanted to kind of figure out how many more survivors there were. And there was also like a scene where like the kids, when they were running away from the monsters, they set light to a fire, but nobody else did. And I'm wondering so their house was set in like a valley. So I'm wondering if all the other houses could like see the status of the lights, and if it acted as like a warning system to stay indoors. So like if the lights were normal, they could like light their fires and stuff like that. And if the lights were red, they're just like, okay, we don't need to light anything, stay indoors, stuff like that. If they had like a little community set up. So I really liked this movie. I liked the world building. I wanted to see more of it, and I left wanting more of it. Wouldn't you agree, Dylan?
Absolutely. The movie itself, I think looking at it from a standpoint of a, like, if you're going to compare it to, it's listed as a horror film. I personally didn't see it as horror-based, because, yes, are there some jump scares? Absolutely. Any thriller movie's going to have a few jump scares. It's the way to grab the audience's attention all of a sudden. Like, if there's a lull in the excitement, it gets you back into it. So, in that aspect, it did well. But watching it, I never felt like... I guess like the dread I felt when you knew a monster was coming was different from watching something like an old horror film where you know something's about to happen. Whereas in this film, just because a noise happened didn't necessarily mean the monster was just gonna appear. Obviously, the monsters, it seems they're constantly hunting, so you didn't know how long it would take before the monster appeared. You didn't know like when it would show up, what exactly it would pursue. I also liked, I think one of my favorite things from it is they didn't overdo the jump scares and stuff. Really, if I was to count them, I could probably count how many jump scares on one hand. There wasn't that many, but that was great. Most of the suspense was from the build up of, there's a scene in the film where the kids are, you see it in the trailer, where they're playing Monopoly and they're being really quiet, and then one of them accidentally knocks over a glass lantern and it shatters, and that attracts a monster because it hears the glass shatter. Which, by the way, I get it. They're these super hearing things that like you see in the movie, like they've got these crazy ears that they can hear with. It could hear that from wherever in the world it was.
Yeah.
Way out in the woods. That's impressive.
That is very impressive.
Because it was just a little, like, that, the lantern didn't fall off a table or anything. It was just sitting next to him. They accidentally bumped it over. But scenes like that, where the buildup was just, oh god, you know what's going to happen because they knocked it over. Like, you know it's coming, and yet you still feel that dread. Whereas, there have been previous horror films I've watched where something happens and you know just by the change in pitch, the music change, which I do like. Unlike most horror films, when the monsters were approaching or something bad was about to happen, there wasn't some like low rumble into a crescendo for music. If anything, it went dead silent.
And I think that set the tone for the movie, because like if you didn't stay quiet, you died. and it helped build up that suspense. It was almost like you were there. I want to gauge Steve's opinion real quick, not necessarily about the movie A Quiet Place, but really about your opinion of horror in general. Like, what type of horror do you like better? Do you like the jump scares, or do you like more psychological, mess with your head type of horror?
I mean, I like the psychological stuff a lot better, just because like the jump scary kind of stuff, like I'll just sit there and I'll just like make joking commentary, because for the most part, in my opinion, like the jump scary movies are kind of just, they're very predictable, and that's just not scary to me. But the psychological ones, like what sounds like this one, A Quiet Place, sounds a lot like that, where like you guys are just talking about like dropping that lantern breaks, and then like you, all right, like you know something's coming, and like you don't have to do that whole music and stuff like that. Like you just know, like, oh yeah, things are gonna get bad for a second or a lot longer. And honestly, I like that stuff because it really puts in perspective of what the like director and story writers and actors are trying to portray and stuff like that, and really just makes you feel a lot more I don't know, I feel a lot more involved and immersed in the movie, and like wanting more when it's something like that, rather than just like, I'm gonna throw a scary face at you like 9 times, and it's like, oh, okay.
And that okay, so that's actually, now that you mentioned that, I actually didn't think about that. You know, in a lot of horror films, when there's a monster, or like I specifically remember in like the Annabelle films, there's the demon that shows up.
I've never seen the Annabelle films.
Okay, well, wait, I thought you saw Creation with us, didn't you?
No, I went to bed because remember,
right.
I was drunk. I had work in the morning, and I wanted to sleep it off.
I was also drunk.
So in both Annabelle and Annabelle Creation, there's a demon that you see, and he's freaky looking. Don't get me wrong. If I ever saw this in my room, I'd probably die of a heart attack before it could eat me or whatever. But there's scenes where the camera looks straight at it and it jumps at the camera. This movie never did that. There's no scene where the monsters look at the camera and leap at the camera to scare you. I enjoyed that because most movies, I get the point, you're trying to scare the audience, but I think that since the focus was on the characters of the movie, you got that sense of dread and fear anyway. Because me and Dale were talking about this before the podcast, where there's a lot of scenes in the movie where it shifts on who hears stuff, because there's, again, one of the oldest daughter, she is deaf, so there's scenes in the movie where they'll be together, but it'll be like, it'll follow John Krasinski and he can hear everything, and then like the camera will pan over to the deaf daughter, and like all sound will start like fading away until it's just muted, and then you're just watching a silent film for a moment because it's supposed to be from her perspective. And then like there are scenes where suddenly all the sound comes rushing back because now it pans back over to a character that can hear. I enjoyed that because it was like you got to experience what they were experiencing without outward force, without almost a fourth wall break. Like when a monster jumps at a screen or something, it's almost equal to a fourth wall break, because that scene is not there to scare the character in the movie, it's there to scare your audience, which is fine. I get what you're doing, but this movie did, I feel it did something a little unique and different in that it focused on the story itself rather than the audience that was watching it, which some people may say that may seem like it's not targeted at the audience, they're not trying to get a reaction out of you, but I think that made the characters more human. It made the movie seem more real and immersive, which is what I want when I go see a movie. I want to be in the movie. I don't want to just be a bystander in the background watching it happen. I want to feel like I'm there. So that did a lot to draw you into those moments when it was like the monster was there, but it wasn't necessarily coming at you, the audience. It was, you felt the dread and fear because it was coming at that character, and you could feel like you were there in that character's shoes.
I also want to talk about Emily Blunt's performance in this movie. We keep praising John Krasinski. He did a wonderful job, but truthfully, every actor and actress in the movie did a phenomenal job. And Emily Blunt, who played the mom, she was pregnant, and she went into labor, and she had to do it silently. And she went down to the basement. I don't know why she went down there specifically, but while she was doing the laundry earlier, the laundry bag got caught on a nail, and she pulled it up real quick, and it pulled the nail straight up. So while she went down the stairs, her foot, she stepped on the nail and dropped whatever she was carrying, and that's what made the monsters attack in the first place. And so bless her heart, I felt as much dread for that scene as I feel the mom did, because she's going into the labor. Like every 5 minutes, her contractions are hitting, and she's trying to be as silent as she can. She goes all the way up the stairs, and she's giving birth in the bathtub, and she cannot scream at all.
While there's a monster
Like,
literally
right
right
outside
outside
the door.
of the door. That scene was intense.
Oh my God.
Because okay, so this movie I feel really should be renamed. Instead of A Quiet Place, it should be John Krasinski and family has
Can't
bad
catch a
luck.
break.
Yeah, can't they? Because this, like, you watch the film and from the get-go, their family is screwed. Like, they have the worst possible luck, which I imagine everyone that exists in this universe would have similar luck with these monsters roaming around. But it just seems like this family is screwed over 10 times. Like, they
have the protagonist problem.
yeah, because John Krasinski's there, so obviously, which actually, although, okay, so again, like you said, we praise John Krasinski for doing such a good job, but everyone did a wonderful job, including the children actors, which I'm not a big fan of children actors for multiple reasons, not necessarily because they're bad, but there are a lot of really bad children actors. Really,
And a lot of them are, like, typecasted. They're, like, way older than they should be. So, like, I'm not going to call him a children actor or a child actor, but, like, having Tobey Maguire play Peter Parker, like some 30-year-old man trying to play a high schooler, as opposed to Peter Holland, who's actually, closer to that age. What'd you say?
It's Tom Holland.
Tom Holland.
Whatever
Did I
his
say
name
Peter
is.
Holland?
yeah,
Oops. Tom
Peter
Holland.
Parker. Don't worry, you got it.
Yeah, I got it.
We'll never get him on the show now.
Yeah, never.
We're
Darn.
so sorry, Tom Holland. We're so sorry.
I also want to point out something. If the two listeners that will regularly listen to this podcast are of legal drinking age, you take a shot every time we say John Krasinski, and you will die of alcohol poisoning.
Well, I don't want to call him Jim because I don't
That's
know,
typecasting.
that he doesn't just fit Jim. Like don't get me wrong, I love that show. One of my favorite shows. It and Parks and Rec or something I can watch over and over
The
and over
Office
again.
has defined my sense of humor. Very, very dry humor, and for a more mature audience. Not mature in its content, but in its humor. And I feel like as an adult, I can relate with that comedy style better. And that just helped mold my comedy style. And Jim Halpert was very influential in doing that. Thank you, John Krasinski. Continue making wonderful movies.
But
continue.
Anyway, like the whole thing with like how all the actors I never felt like there was something one of my English teachers told me in high school. We got asked the question because we did a lot of like book reviews crap where we had to like review a book and then also we would watch the movie. And I remember she asked us one day, she was like, who do you think the main protagonist for this story was? And of course we all said, well, it's the character that it tells the point of view from the whole time. And she's like, no, because that character dies. And he does in the book. This character from the story dies relatively before the book ends, and it's still almost told from his perspective, but it's about another character. I feel like the same thing can be said of Quiet Place. It doesn't necessarily only come from John Krasinski's point of view. The movie has tons of scenes. If anything, I would say the main character was probably the deaf daughter, because you see her develop, I guess, the most as a character, because she goes from being in the opening scene, just your standard girl. She's probably like what you'd say, 14 maybe.
I'd say younger than that.
Probably
maybe,
10.
maybe
Probably 10. Yeah, 10 years old is probably a better age. She goes from being a 10-year-old who's very scared of the situation, obviously being deaf in a world like this where you can't tell where the monsters are or what you can hear to prevent causing too much noise must be even more terrifying. I felt like the actress, what is her name? Millicent Simmons. She did a wonderful job portraying. First off, I assume she's not really deaf. More than likely isn't. I don't think so.
She did a wonderful job.
She did a good job. I mean,
that character.
I've met actually quite a few deaf people, but and it's not that they function differently from people who can hear, but she did a good job at portraying a character that here, even in this trying time, she was able to grow and overcome, because by the end of the film, she goes from being scared 10-year-old deaf girl to I can overcome this, and if anything, she's going to be the new leader for her family, because, spoiler alert, it's not going to be John Krasinski by the end of the film.
What?
Yeah.
Who?
Unfortunately. Who?
Seriously, you should have me on shot number 24 by now.
The man's gifted. And the fact that I didn't know this going into the film, that he wrote, directed, and produced this film. I thought he was just the head actor, like he was the lead actor, but then to learn when the final credits come rolling, and it's like, oh no, he actually like made this whole story basically.
He ran the show.
Like he like dang. And a lot of people may look at that and be like, oh, it's kind of like almost like when Mel Gibson did The Patriot or Braveheart or Passion, where basically he made the story, and starred as the main guy.
Ben Affleck as Batman, which we don't heard.
Well, I didn't like, but the whole time of the movie, I didn't get the feeling that this was like John Krasinski's love child, that he made himself the star of the show. No, again, he made sure every character in the story had a growing point, had a moment of, this is about them, and you need to see how they grow as a character. So like their second child, throughout the most of the movie, because again, it's a rather short film in comparison to movies nowadays. So there is, like, if you really think about it, nearly the entire movie happens within a day. Sure, it does a little jump cut where you go from day 89 to day 247 or something like that.
It was like 472.
I think that's later, because they do something like 200 or something, I think, and then they go to 400 or something. I don't remember.
I only saw it once.
Yeah,
and I saw it 2 hours ago. So.
Yeah, so. But in those time jumps and everything, like, the majority of the film happens in one singular day. Mm-hmm. And during that day is, like, John Krasinski is teaching his son, which I don't remember. The actor who plays the son is Noah Jupe, I guess is how you say his last name. I'm not sure. But, I mean, like, you see him and he grows, Jim. See? John Krasinski's like teaching his son, like, you have to be the man, like, you have to, that I'm not always going to be here, so you need to be able to take care of yourself, of your siblings, of your mom, and which is actually a lot of foreshadowing to the story later. But again, like, that character, just as a little boy alone, you immediately see how that affects him and how he grows, because there's a scene where the monsters are at their home, and in order to get the monster away from the mother while she's having the child, the son has to run and set off fireworks so that it makes enough noise to draw the monster away. So, like, that scene alone shows you progression as the character. I felt like in a TV show, when you're watching stuff where character progression, it happens like seasons at a time. Like, there are characters that it takes episodes upon episodes to get some growth, but this movie did really well with these characters progressed in what little time you had to see the movie. Like, I could see this movie honestly being almost like a TV show, similar to like The Mist or something like that, where they are It's a continuous show, but it's like the same situation. I mean,
Yeah.
the mist happens within like a week's time. So, I mean, I could see it similar to that, but I think all the actors and actresses did a wonderful job progressing the story and showing character growth in that short time frame.
Steve, do you have anything you want to add?
I still haven't seen a movie.
Would this review change your mind on seeing the movie?
Honestly, yeah. I'd actually give it a shot. I'd probably try and watch it with a lot of people because, I don't know, I might be scared, but whatever.
Oh, I also
I was definitely scared, but I was more scared in the beginning when we didn't know what they looked like. But after we saw what they look like, I was like, well, that's still terrifying, but not as much. No, what was scary was whenever the scene with the basement flooding, and the thing was in the basement with them.
Which I have no idea how it got in the basement. That makes no sense.
And the mom, like, she slowly dips her feet in the water to go get the newborn baby, and the monster, like, slips under the water like a freaking alligator, and it's down there, and you're just like, okay, lady, I know you love your baby. Get back on the bed.
You can always make another.
Yeah.
That was, and again, like, that was probably the most stressful scene, I think, in the whole film, because I hate anything where a child might be harmed. That gets to me. Being a dad, that is terrifying.
And that gets to me because my personal irrational fear, it's not water,
Babies.
but it's anything in the water, like, that you can't see. So, like, I'm not scared of the ocean. I'm scared of what's in the ocean that could get me, and I have no idea it's coming for me.
So, I have a question. So,
Yes.
baby is born.
Yes.
Usually when babies become born, they like to make noises.
Yes.
So how does this work out?
So,
the baby made noise.
which
like-
attracted a monster. No, they had thought ahead of this. There's scenes very early on in the film where you see them actually getting prepared for the babies coming. They built a crib made of wood, and they've stuffed it full of blankets and stuff, and they have an oxygen mask running into it so that if they have to be quiet, they strap the oxygen mask to the baby and then put it into there and seal it shut so that no noise escapes the box, but the baby won't suffocate. That way they can hide and sit there quietly if a monster ever shows up. So that scene happens pretty much right after the baby is born. They realize the monster's going to come because the baby starts crying, and they have to hide. So they get into like this little bunker that they've made to hide from them that they've designed. They've soundproofed the whole room. So they run in there, and John Krasinski immediately like takes the baby, puts the mask on it, and sticks it in this crib and shuts it. That way the monster doesn't hear him crying anymore. And they sit there, and then like a couple scenes later, you see they're fine because it's soundproof. They didn't hear the baby's fine. Which, I mean, yes, that was a very calm baby. That baby was chill. But then again, I mean, when my son was born, he didn't actually make that much noise. He cried when he was born, and then he immediately stopped.
And then when I was born, I high-fived the doctor. I just came out like a legend. Didn't cry at all. I actually, I was saying heck yeah the whole time.
I want to give.
I was a cool baby.
I know this guy will never hear it, but I want to give a shout out to Leon Russum. I guess that's how you say his name.
Saul Oldman.
Yeah, for best Oldman that could screw over a family. Because there's a scene in this where John Krasinski and the son have been out hunting or fishing, and they're coming home.
I mean, that's technically hunting.
Yeah, they come home with their catch, and while they're walking home on the trail, they see an old man standing next to his wife, who has obviously been killed. You can only assume it had to have been one of the monsters, and the man found her. And he stands there. John Krasinski looks at Oldman and is like, Just stay quiet, bro. Shh, it's okay.
That's what he says. He says, hey, bro,
And he doesn't
chillax.
say anything. He just holds his finger up to his mouth. But he's just he's basically begging the man, please don't make any noise. And at that moment, the old man stops, looks him dead in the eye, and then screams at the top of his lungs, and I'm like, you are the worst kind of person.
He flips him off with both fingers. He's just like, screw you telling me to shut up. My wife's dead.
I know this is a traumatizing event, and your wife just died. Trust me, I get it. It's horrible. No one likes death. But right then and there is not the time to just decide, I give up on everything. I'm going to scream and not only get myself killed, but get this guy and his kid killed.
It's like, look here, Santa. I'm just trying to get my family fed. Leave me alone.
So,
and then this guy's like, nah! And then, like, he dies. But the kid has... John Krasinski has the worst job as this dad, because his son, who is afraid of everything, he has to, like, cover his mouth, and, like, the kid has to cover his ears, and John Krasinski, bless his heart, his character has seen some stuff. I wonder if he's going for, like, this character that maybe went through some trauma in his life, so this doesn't affect him as much. And, but, like, his kids had a lot to go through. So, Dylan, what was your favorite part of the movie, and what was your least favorite part of the movie?
I think my favorite part... My favorite part would... Honestly, I don't know. There was a lot of good scenes. I think the best possible scene, as far as, if we're going to say, like, what was my favorite scene for the acting and for... those moments, was probably when John Krasinski and his son are out fishing, and John is explaining to his son, like, this is, while the river's running, everything's fine. Like, it's fine. Like, it gives... I enjoyed the scene of, it's basically him teaching his son how to be a man, and to overcome his fear. I enjoyed that scene for what it was, what it represents. Just that spoke to me on a personal level. If you were gonna talk more of, like, scene-wise and, like, suspense building, I would definitely say the basement scene when it's flooded. That scene was just, it was really intense. I think during that scene, I had to sit there and, like, hold my face, because I was so anxious for what was going to happen. Like,
I had to hold my ears because I didn't want to hear or see Babel die.
Yeah, so I was really freaking out about that. Which, well, you know what? This is a spoiler, but who cares? No babies were harmed in this film.
Lots of Jim Halperts were harmed in this film, but no Babels.
Lots of babies were put into boxes.
Yeah, they were placed in boxes. I mean, it worked out for Moses. This kid's fine.
Yeah.
I would
don't
say,
single
though,
out Moses. Kal-El, come on.
Yeah. Okay, so
This movie sucked.
least favorite scene, probably really any scene where I didn't care for the scene where it shows the daughter go out to their little shrine they've made to their son that died.
Yeah.
Not because, again, like, that was a very touching moment. I understood what it meant. I didn't understand what it had to do with the overall story. I get it that she feels responsible for his death, so she's kind of coming to mourn and I don't know, just in remembrance. She leaves a toy there, and then ends up, I guess, falling asleep next to it. I get it that scene served as the purpose of why she wouldn't be at home when the monsters arrive. It felt kind of forced, as far as they needed a reason to get her away from the house. This was the reason. Mm-hmm. Other than that, though, there wasn't many parts of the movie that I just hated or anything like that. I thought overall it was a great film, and that's saying something, because just about any movie nowadays, it's pretty easy to have that one scene that's, like, cringy or that you just don't like. But there wasn't many scenes in this movie that I thought just were awful.
Well, I think that's about... I would have to agree with you. I didn't quite like the scene with the old man. I understand the purpose it had, but I don't know. I didn't like it very much.
It was another one that felt kind of forced.
Yeah, just a little bit. Well, I think we're about out of time. Plus, this room is hot. I need to cool off a little bit. That might just be the 2 cups of coffee I had. But at any rate, thank y'all for listening to our review of A Quiet Place. It's in theaters now. It is a wonderful movie. I would recommend it. Steve, you have any parting words?
I still haven't seen this movie.
No, and that, but see, don't. I would definitely say don't let it, just because it's a suspense thriller horror film, keep you from seeing it. It's a great movie overall. Like, it has touching moments. It has, I mean, there's like the scene with the mom and dad dancing to music,
country music.
Country, yeah, it doesn't matter what kind, but they're dancing to it, and it's a really touching thing because
I think it does matter what they're dancing to. If they dance to Rob Zombie, that scene will play differently.
So I mean, it's full of scenes like that. It's got a lot of heartwarming and heart-wrenching scenes. I would definitely say anyone who's like, probably mostly women, if you're a huge Jim Halpert fan, you're probably gonna cry by the end of the film.
John Krasinski.
But I would definitely say, though, go see the movie. And now, granted, don't take our word for it just because we're praising it so much. You're gonna hear critics say it was bad.
Critics?
Yeah, good point. But like we've said, but like we even say, like, there are scenes in the movie we didn't necessarily like, but that doesn't mean that the movie as a whole was bad. Go see it, figure out for yourself. Most of all, just enjoy yourself, and I think that's half the movie right there. So really, just go see it for yourself, see what you think. But I think, yeah, we're about out of time, so we'll see you guys later. Thanks for joining us. We hope you take it into consideration.
And remember, don't even fart.